Hello, my name is Dr Vicky Cleak and I'm a consultant psychiatrist with a special interest in adult ADHD. And today we're going to talk about the effect of ADHD on your finances. So we know that ADHD has a massive impact on an individual's finances, and I am here to explain why that might be. So what do we know about those with ADHD and their finances? Well, those with a higher number of ADHD symptoms tend to have worse finances, and those diagnosed with ADHD are less well off financially in the long term. We know that poor financing affects the quality of housing people have, so people with ADHD are more likely to have poorer housing, that there's increased rates of debt and bankruptcy in those with ADHD. The presence of ADHD affects whether or not a person has a pension. They're less likely to have one, to make regular contributions, and also those with ADHD often have much smaller savings. We know that we can treat ADHD, and if we do treat ADHD, there is a reduction in negative financial consequences. And a study looked at those people who treated for their ADHD from childhood into their 20s and 30s and showed that this was in fact the case. So we know from studies that those with ADHD prefer others to make financial decisions for them. However, we also know from studies that those with ADHD are significantly more likely to have had legal action against them for debt over the last 5 years. That was an American study. Prefer others to make financial decisions for them, not likely to have as many savings as those without ADHD, to be more likely in arrears, to not know what their gross income is and how much left of spending they have each month, and to not know their exact money incomings and outgoings. However, when studies looked at the financial understanding between those people with ADHD and those without ADHD, there wasn't a difference in their understanding or financial knowledge. So how come those with ADHD are much more likely to be in debt and have financial difficulties with poorer financial long-term consequences? Well, I think it comes down to thinking about the core features of ADHD and how these might impact on your finances. Of course, we know the core features of ADHD include impulsivity, difficulty waiting, poor working memory, having that emotional dysregulation, the short-term super intense interests with hyperfocus, poor planning generally, forgetfulness, procrastination, making careless mistakes and losing things. And all of these things can impact on finances, as we will discuss. So in terms of impulsivity, people with ADHD are prone to doom scrolling on their phone. Nowadays, with the internet, we're able to make purchases 24/7, and we know that shopping is associated with short-term dopamine boosts of feel good. So those with ADHD are much more prone to make impulsive purchases, often forgetting what they've ordered, and when it has ordered, often then finding they haven't a need for it or that they've lost interest in it, and that sort of buyer's remorse can lead to a real impact on finances. People with ADHD struggle to wait, and they often will end up happily paying extra to get an item delivered more quickly. I see that very frequently in my clinic, and that over time really adds up considerably. Those with ADHD often have very poor working memory, and the consequences of that can mean that they might purchase an item again because they've forgotten that they've already ordered it, that they may, and I've seen looking in food cupboards to see whether you've got multiples of the same item because they've been ordered several times, looking in craft cupboards to see that there's huge amounts of craft supplies that perhaps aren't needed. Those with ADHD really struggle to remember passwords, particularly if there's a gap. They go on holiday and they come back and they can't remember what the password was when they last used it, and that can lead to problems accessing their bank accounts and not keeping on top of what their finances are actually doing. Poor working memory also means that people with ADHD often have to learn a lesson several times that someone without ADHD will remember after making the mistake the first time, and that can be the case with financial mistakes too. Although emotional dysregulation is not an ICD-10 criteria for a diagnosis, we know that many people with ADHD do struggle to keep their tempers, that they've got short fuses, and they have emotional dysregulation. One of the impacts of that can be buying things to feel better, but also frustrations with the barriers in accessing help around your finances. So if you need some help on the phone, that waiting on the phone can lead to a person with ADHD getting quite angry or giving up. We often talk about a difficulty in paying attention for long periods of time with ADHD, but actually ADHD is a problem with emotional regulation, and the full consequences of that means that you can also have periods of hyperfocus and short-term very intense interests. So I know somebody who got very interested in coffee making and investigated all the different coffee machines that they could possibly buy, eventually purchasing one online, and by the time it actually got there they just never unboxed it, and it sort of sat fully boxed on the side for months on end. In my practice I often ask people about their hobbies and interests over their life, and often people with ADHD have had numerous very intense short-term interests and have either got bored quite quickly after spending quite a lot of time or outlay of money in getting all the equipment and joining up, or they get distracted by another interest which seems more interesting, and so they start something new and thus never finish what they were doing beforehand. Those with ADHD often really struggle to prioritize. Their to-do lists feel as though all actions on it are equally competing and equally important, which can lead to overwhelm. And that's because the difficulty a person with ADHD has in keeping these items in mind, which is why writing them down can be really helpful in black and white, but also in, once they are in the mind, considering them to prioritize and decide on steps to take. Equally, that will become even more difficult for someone with ADHD if it's something that the person finds less interesting. And sadly, many people out there find their finances, administrative tasks generally, quite dull, and so they put them off massively and have difficulty in prioritising them. And that can lead to never getting around to even having a bank account, a savings account, setting up regular direct debits into your savings account, or setting up a pension. Those with ADHD may often start with a clear financial goal, but then that goal changes over time, and they really struggle to stick to those long-term financial goals. Forgetfulness is a potential cause of ADHD attacks. Very commonly, people with ADHD will forget that they have direct debits that they for an item that they no longer, or a service they no longer use. They may have unpaid bills, so one of the strategies to manage that is to make all your bills direct debit. I always ask my patients whether they've ever received car parking tickets or fines. Often a person has parked in an inappropriate place without realising, or have gone well over the time that they thought they would take, and so have gained parking tickets. Getting your tax return in on time and accurate can also be a significant challenge for a number of reasons, also including forgetfulness for those with ADHD. Procrastination, so I touched on it a minute ago. People with ADHD will put off tasks that really don't seem interesting, exciting, or threatening or pressurizing to them until the very last moment. So they will wait until the stress levels get high enough for the dopamine levels to be enough to tip them into action. And so that means putting off any financial decisions, delaying and getting around to sort out insurance, or shopping around for a better deal towards the end of a contract ending. As we said, putting off organising your pension and your wills, going to see a financial advisor, and not applying for financial support. And in fact, I know of a woman who had a disabled child who really put off completing the numerous forms required to get financial assistance and a carer's allowance. And finally, when she did do that, because of the number of errors she made on the form due to inattention, the forms were returned to her, and then another significant amount of time went by before she got around to trying again. So being in that sort of situation can really lead to massive financial penalty compared with somebody else who doesn't have ADHD. Making careless mistakes because of inattention, having a number of other distractions in your mind or externally leads to mistakes, and then that leads to forms being returned, being turned down for loans. That general computer says no. Can be really frustrating for someone with ADHD, and it can lead to them either giving up or getting very angry. Mentioned losing passwords, which are necessary nowadays to get anything done, your sort of general day-to-day life. Losing your pay slips. So if you haven't got all your pay slips organised and can find them when it comes to retirement, if the pension agency needs proof or they have lost information about your past working life, you can find out that actually you're not getting the pension that you deserve. Keeping all of your financial information organised and easy to navigate through can be a challenge. Those with ADHD often have multiple tabs. They don't clear through and organise their emails, and that can make it very difficult to find the information they need when they are required to provide it. So what can someone with ADHD do to maximise their financial planning? Well, I guess knowing firstly that ADHD can significantly impact on your finances and the ways that it can do so, that sort of knowledge can really help you to reduce and perhaps get rid of some of the shame that may make some of these things even worse. Getting good financial education and support, either through friends and family, through the Citizens Advice Bureau, or through financial independent advice, is key. There are certainly some great apps out there that can help you be able to know what's in your bank account, what your ingoings and outgoings are, where you can set limits with regards to that. Setting a time in your diary every 6 months to 12 months to review your financial situation can be really helpful, as well as going through all of your direct debits so that you know that you're not that you cancelled any that are not being used anymore. Organising your paper files as well as your files on your computer makes a big difference, as well as outsourcing some of this to someone that you trust that can help either coach you in this or keep you accountable to what your goals are. And as we said about setting limits on spending or time you're on your phone so that you aren't making impulse purchases as much, can be really helpful. Another top tip that one of my patients had was that if they bought things on Amazon, they would put it into their shopping basket but not actually purchase it until the next day, and that space meant that their spending reduced and they made less impulsive and pointless purchases. So in summary, those people with ADHD overall have lower incomes, are more likely to be in debt, they're less likely to have any savings, they're more likely to be living at home as adults, and they are overall poorer. But there are things you can do to make that less likely for you. So coming to a point of reflection on your own circumstances, given what we've talked about today, how do you think your finances have been affected by your ADHD over your life? What have you done in the past to mitigate this? What support have you had, either knowingly or unknowingly? What new ideas have arisen for you in terms of how to manage your finances better, and what actions will you take? And this might be a good time, if you like, to get your Woman's Guide to ADHD Mastery, which is available at my website, drvickycleak.co.uk, and is free to download to reflect on your experiences of how your ADHD has affected your financial life. So I hope you found that discussion about ADHD and finances useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.